coming to you from the all-new Live House in Hollywood, California.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Pensado's Place. We're going to take a look at the art of rock songwriting and producing in just a second. But first, we're going to be on the road this summer. A number of things coming up. June 21st and 2nd, we'll be at Sweetwater's Gear Fest. That extravaganza is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Summer NAMM is coming up July 18th through the 20th. We've teamed up with NAMM to give out 500 free badges. To register, click this link right below me, enter the promo code Pensado, and you can go for free. Dave and I will be speaking on the 20th at the Music Center, and we're going to announce a special guest pretty soon. We're still working on it. A couple of cities being discussed, Atlanta a couple of times, DC, New York. Once we have all those details, we'll fill you in. And a great way to fill you in is for you to sign up for our newsletter, and then we can keep you informed. Also, like and subscribe, which helps a bunch. And of course, we thank you for that. Sometimes life intrudes, and it did this week. Our industry lost a beloved figure. Kevin Becca was co-director, co-founder, and instructor at the Blackbird Academy, an editor at Mix Magazine and others, an engineer, and he left us this week. Kevin was big-hearted, caring, passionate about music, and giving back. I know when Dave and I would go down and watch him with Blackbird students, it was always incredible. David Francesco, which we call David Platolero, when he had his accident, Kevin was there for him the whole time, participated in this bike ride they had. I think last year they rode 500 miles, which was incredible. He was incredibly close to somebody on our staff, Talisha. Kevin was just a great dude.
Yeah, he epitomized everything great about our profession. He was generous. He was accommodating. He had the patience of Job with me. I gave him a hard time sometimes, inadvertently, and it's going to be missed, Herb.
Absolutely. From all of us to Kevin's family, and from all of us to our Blackbird family, our sincere condolences. Kevin Becca, gone too soon. Now let's meet our guest. He's worked with Neon Trees, Walk the Moon, El King, Blink 182, and a whole host of others. Please welcome to the desk, Tim Pagnotta.
Thank you.
How are you, man?
Thank
you so much. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you. It's great to be on here.
Yeah, for sure.
You got this long, illustrious work that's incredible. But one of the things that I find fascinating about what was said about you is that your love for alternative kind of songs has also resulted in that genre of music becoming top 40 hits. Is there intention in your production or songwriting for that, or is that just the luck of the draw?
I mean, yeah, you obviously want the best for your songs and your production, and to a certain point, you know, you have no control over it. You know, you make records and you don't stop. You know, making an album, whether it's producing it, whether you're writing songs, you don't stop till it feels like it's dinging the bell. You know, and then. And you just hope for the best, and you have no idea what's going to happen. You know, when a song gets on the radio, and they don't all, you know, by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, that's the thing with this. It's, you know, we work on day in and day out tons of songs, and you have no idea which ones are going to connect. When they do, it's, you know, it's awesome. It's incredible. So I think that, you know, when I'm working on records and a couple of songs or raise their hand, I think there's certain things that you do to try to make sure the arrangement's together. You know, if you feel like there's a song where there's a chorus that's really connecting, you just have that feeling. I don't know how to describe it. You know, whenever I have that experience, I'm working on a record, I really go after it. And you just hope other people can have that same feeling, you know, whether that's, you know, it becomes a hit, you really don't have any control. So, but I mean, you know, I grew up listening to records that to me at the time felt larger than life, you know, like I grew up as a kid in the 80s and my parents had a record player and you know, it all makes sense now, you know, like being a kid at a young age and getting, entertaining yourself with headphones and listening to your, you know, your parents' records, which at the time were, you know, Duran Duran, Men at Work, you know, Culture Club, Cyndi Lauper, you know, big songs, larger than life personalities. And I think, you know, in the studio, I try to do that. You know, I try to make sure that when I'm working with an artist, you know, that it's a bit of an exaggerated version of the song, or you hone in on what's special about, you know, the players or the singer, and you just try to put it on steroids, and you don't stop till you get there.
But it makes part of the skill set, besides what's in your head and what you're able to play and what you're able to write and interpret, is also developing a gut instinct.
Yeah.
To know that this works versus that, or this feels better, or the reaction to this is good, let me go farther. That's sometimes in here, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I compare, you know, I'm a bit self-taught, you know, so I still come at music from a fan's perspective. You know, I still get those feelings when I hear a great song on the radio. Yeah. And I try to make sure that I have that type of objectivity throughout the process. You know, sometimes I remove myself from even like certain parts of editing so I can walk in and have a fresh perspective, because I think that's really important. But yeah, to your point, you have this feeling inside, and I try to think about when I'm listening to other songs on the radio or songs that I grew up listening to, that feeling that you get. It's, you know, and try to get close to that on a record. What? Yeah.
I love Herb's question. To me, like you have a lack of fear about melodies. Like a lot of the rock guys in the rock world are afraid of melody.
Yeah.
And your melodies are what kind of catch my ear. And so I don't know if that comes from experience, or if that comes from just listening to all those records in the 80s.
I mean, I was going to say, the records that you listened to were certainly melodic.
Yeah.
Culture Club, Wham, Cyndi Lauper, you know, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I work with great artists and trust their instincts too.
Absolutely.
And this show's not about humility. You did all the work. We know that.
No. And I try to encourage that. And I think, you know, and that's my job. And that's my job, whether it's in the producing role or the songwriting role. You know, I'm trying to help encourage the artists to take those leaps of faith. But yeah, I mean, I love melodic payoffs in ways that, you know, take me back to my youth. But at the same time, you know, I want to be working on records and encouraging something that sounds like no one's ever heard before as well. So, you know, that's definitely a part of the process.
Along the way, with all the great artists you worked with, there's also been collaboration with other producers and songwriters, right? Matt Wallace, other folks, correct?
Yeah.
And is that part of the shaping process where you decide where you fit in and try to help? Because collaborations are give and take. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you're constantly learning from people. And I when I got my start being in a band, so I was a singer songwriter in Sugarcult. And I was just so fascinated by the recording, process. And Matt Wallace produced our first record, and that was and every producer brought something different that we worked with. Right. He was someone that really perfected the art. He's great at a lot of things, but one of the things that really stood out to me was the pre-production process. I'd never gone through making a record professionally before, but he was of the school that you're kind of capturing a moment in time. We were a rambunctious band, and he had us, rehearsing, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day in a rehearsal studio for 2 weeks before we were, then we could get past the next phase, which is, okay, now you're worthy of me setting up mics around you and recording this. So, there was guys like that, and he was so great by, making records could be a 6-week, 8-week, 3-month process. And he was really great at the skill of keeping the enthusiasm up throughout that process, which can be terrifying, especially for, a young artist. So, I learned from great guys like that. Gavin McKillop was a producer that we worked with a lot when I was in a band. And he was great with sounds, you know, and I was the like Punisher, following him around the studio, asking about, you know, well, what's that piece of gear? Oh, it's a Quad 8 console. Well, tell me about it. Why are we choosing this microphone over this mic? And because I paid attention to productions at a young age before I even knew what it was. And when I would write songs, I would hear a certain amount of the production in my head, drum patterns, you know, effects. You know, I might have not known what they were called at the time.
Sure.
But I would say that the mentorship early on was super important. And that was a very collaborative process. The same now with the relationship I have with either the artists or myself, sometimes with other producers. Yeah, it's really important. It's where we learn, you know, because a lot of the stuff is like you can only teach so much in a textbook, and it can give you a great baseline for a lot of things. But learning certain techniques from other people that I help, you know, that I use all the time, every day. You know, they've learned from other people.
In my limited experience with bands, it's the hardest part is just band dynamics inside the band itself.
Sure.
Like there's always one alpha. There's always guys that get left behind, and the dynamics of it, keeping it together and keeping it. It's like an athletic team in competition. You know, it's.
Absolutely.
And you must be good at that. I haven't been to one of your sessions.
I mean,
without
you know,
that, and Matt's brilliant at it. I've seen Matt.
He's great. He's awesome. He's definitely one of the best. It's a huge part of the process, you know, is keeping it's, you know, I think there's many jobs of a producer, but you know, you're trying to push things forward, challenge a band. And when you get into those territories, people feel uncomfortable. They want to, you know, resist change. They may even, if they're, you know, and you know, sometimes you might be working with a band that's, you know, established and a little bit more resistant to change, and they go, "Hey, man, this is kind of my thing," and you have to kind of know, you know, where to pick your battles. And then the other thing too is like what's important, you know, and that's something where I would say when I first started getting into producing, it was, you know, it was diving right into the deep end. I think, you know, the first record I produced was the first Neon Trees album, where and that was a huge opportunity, and having been freshly, so I was still in my band and we were still touring, so I obviously knew the band dynamics really well, and it was a little surprising at the time that, oh wow, this band, they have, as you say, like there's certain roles and certain characters in bands that you that are sometimes the same a little throughout, and yeah, definitely nailing band dynamics is a huge part of the job.
A lot of people ask what your earlier influences are. What are your influences now? Do they evolve over time? Who do you look to?
I mean, I think a lot of times,
you?
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much cool stuff coming out these days. A lot of times when I'm in a project, I kind of dive into the what the artist is also listening to as well, and
help inform you and sort of understand the space.
I think that one of the things that's important is that I think, you know, you can do as a producer is help also either define the artist's lane to a certain degree, and kind of also know even a little bit what the parameters are even within that lane. So. You know, and I'm also listening to the records that I'm working on all the time. It's kind of one of those things where, you know, like when a contractor is not working on a job, are they listening to, you know, are they working on their house? You know, you know, I'm working on records all the time, so I'm lots of times listening to what I'm doing. But yeah, I think there's really cool stuff.
Like what?
Like, oh gosh, I mean, I love. When I'm put on the spot, I always blank out. But
we will judge you by this answer. So
yeah, I think Post Malone's doing cool stuff. Oh gosh, I think Halsey's doing some cool stuff. I love The Weeknd. I try to listen to stuff that's probably a little different than the records that I'm making. Whether it's, when I'm listening to them, I'm listening to either recording techniques, rhythmic approaches, sense of melody, things like that might inform me or make me think differently about some of the stuff that I'm doing that might be leaning a little bit more alternative or rock.
And that's really the point I was
Anderson
going
.Paak is awesome.
Absolutely.
I love his stuff.
But I think that's what I was trying to get to, the ability to examine other kinds of genres of music and then figure out what to borrow, learn from, apply. I think it's the only way to be, sort of interesting and ways to be current, but to also reinvent.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Walk the Moon, was that a big marker in your career arc? Because that success was nuts.
It was awesome. Yeah. I mean, that was such a fun record to work on.
Shut up and dance. Whew.
And, when you're working
song.
on these songs, you don't know, it's funny. That was probably Christmas in the studio. You have no idea what a song is going to become.
Yep.
And that was like, that was a process where we had, it was when they came to me to work on music, I had just finished doing a Neon Trees record, Pop Psychology. And I think I played them some of that. I know I played the A&R person that, and they were looking for a new producer, and they were, talking to some people. And the singer and I, Nick, got together and had lunch, and there was chemistry and our hang, which is so important. Working on these records. And then we got into my studio and I set them up, and we did pre-production on, a bunch of songs. And when we're working on that record, I still have like a photo of the dry erase board where you finally start narrowing down what record you're going to make. And these guys are really musical. And the challenge, for me at times was trying to pull some of these arrangements and get them a little tighter. And I remember one day just kind of pleading with the guys. I'm like, guys, just give me
please
4 songs that I can help make tight.
Sure.
And but we didn't know that song was going to be
right. You never know
do what it did. And I ended up we recorded that song a few times. That was one, and that's kind of an example, again, going back, you don't stop till you get that feeling. And I knew that song was special, but you didn't really know. And we cut drums a couple of times for the song at my studio. We recut guitars a few times until we got it right. Neil Avron mixed. And, we were, he ended up mixing the whole record. And then, and then all of a sudden, it starts getting on the radio, getting played a little more and more. But one of the big things though about that band was I had listened to their stuff that they had done before, and it was great. But I went and saw them live, and I don't know whether it was, I saw them down the street at the Palladium. And the sound system was so pounding. And I wanted to record something. I wanted to produce a record for them that had a profile that sounded like a live record on steroids. Had a low end that sounded like music you could work out to. And just everything exaggerated. To a certain degree. I wanted to feel like all the needles were pinned. And
you mentioned resistance to change. I'm gonna tread tightly, softly here. It seems like in the rock genre, which is a really broad genre right now, it seems like there is resistance to change, particularly in the studio, particularly in the choice of instruments, particularly in live versus program things.
Yeah.
How do you see that creeping into your work, and do you consider it part of your responsibilities to try and get them exposed to a lot of the new technologies? Because
I try to also get live instruments in their hands is not out of principle though. Like if I think it's going to, at the end of the day, you know, my job is to serve the song and frame the song. And I think trying to frame the genre, I do work on stuff that's leans more alternative. So, and that's one of the great things I love about alternative music is that you can turn on the radio and hear songs that I was listening to when I was in high school that are still vibrant and getting played. And so I think, you know, there's certain things that are certain techniques of recording that I think can age well over time. So
why does a rock song? I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Why does a rock song always need live drums?
It doesn't.
But it's hard to get that through to some people. You know, I have a special spot in my heart for rock because I was a rock musician until I moved out here, and it's fading. You know, it's not growing. There's a high emphasis on doing what they did in the '60s rather than doing what they're going to do in 2022.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. How does a person in your position overcome that?
I mean, I think that you are, you know, it's a great question. And it's something that, you know, when I'm working on a song, I'm trying to, as much as I can, try to push it sonically in directions or use instruments in ways that, you know, we haven't heard, you know, 100,000 times done, maybe better, you know? So I love incorporating programming and or not using amps and going DI, you know? I would say, you know, and that's something that I've learned, you know, over the last, you know, 10 years. And I'm a bit self-taught. So nothing is necessarily that traditional for me. But I love to encourage that. You know, if you're getting your guitar sounds going DI and smashing it with Decapitator, or like editing the drums in ways that sound really unique, so it locks really well with programming. Yeah. You know, sometimes I say this on records a lot, is that I want to make sure that, you know, we're not being such prisoners of tradition that we're not moving it forward, because
I guess that's the essence of what I'm saying.
All these records that were sometimes they get referenced, you know, in which version of them and which version of the process are we referencing? Are we referencing the soundbite that came out in press at the time that said it was cut live, or because, you know, none of us always were there, or who played what on some of those records. And
you're talking about like
I'm thinking
older
like
records.
Sure, yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
talking,
I got you.
You know, it's our responsibility to try to push these things forward. And sometimes, you do get resistance. But, you know, I try to first and foremost try to approach every production where we have to serve the song first. How can we do it in a way that doesn't sound like something that came out, you know, 2 years ago? You know, how can I engage the artist to really get behind it? You know, and those are part of the goals, and those are part of the challenges on records. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, part of what I think layman's perspective is, in the rock space, there's a lot of in-studio collaborating. In the hip-hop space and so forth, their files are being exchanged. Somebody's doing their work, saying it to somebody else. And if you get something that you like, you may or may not care how it was done. But when you're trying to convince rock band in the room that this is going to happen, and the producer might, you know, the lead singer may not like it, or the A&R person might say, no, we do it this way. You have a different management process to create change, it seems to me. But in your process, in your creative process, when you write, what do you write to? Are you a guitar player?
I play everything badly. Okay. So I just want to get that out of the way first. Yeah. And it's interesting because for a lot of even some of the records I worked on early on that had some, you know, radio songs on them that were a little more synth heavy. I'm not even really that much of a synth person. It just happened to, you know, be right for the song. I would say the process is, I mean, everything's a little bit different. For example, last year when I was working with Elle King, she came to the studio. She's awesome, by the way. Tons of energy. Great songwriter. And I gave her some drumsticks, and I said, you know, let's I'm just going to turn on some mics and just kind of play around out in the live room.
Nice.
And not even to a click, you know. And she was just playing a beat, and I heard, you know, a few bars of the beat that I thought would be fun and inspiring. And I also want to make sure that the process is fun, you know. There's a lot of pressure that goes into making records, the expectations of the artists. I feel bad for some of these artists that, you know, have to write, you know, a bazillion songs, and they're, you know, sometimes in a position where they might have to, you know, be writing with a hit in mind. But this was a situation that was totally organic, played, you know, some bars that I thought, oh, this will be a fun loop we can make. And I got her playing a lot of instruments. I gave her a bass, and we started playing a bass line, and then at a certain point, you turn the music up loud in the control room. You have an SM7, and you start singing, and you're just taking turns. I mean, you know, sometimes it's crazy to think it's a job because you know, because that's a huge part of it. You know, where you're just, you know, you put like a very basic kind of track together, drum beat, guitar line, whoever kind of wants to volunteer an idea to a certain degree. And then, and everyone's a little bit different, by the way, you know, but I try to loosen up the room a little bit, including myself, by the way, because it's, you know, like meeting somebody and saying, okay, you're 10 minutes into a hang. Now, make something up off the top of your head, you know, singing at full volume in a studio. That's a pretty vulnerable position to be in.
Yeah. Tell us about the new single from Blink-182. Oh, you produced it, right? And co-wrote it.
Yeah. So that was a really, really cool experience. I mean, I've grown up listening to that band, or listening to Blink-182. When I was in my old band, we opened for them in Europe for an arena tour, and they, you know, they were open to collaborating, and we got together, and you know, I think when you work with, in this case, you know, when you work with a really great band, I mean, they're all awesome songwriters too. But when you work with a really great band and like them, you know, I think your job is a little different. You're trying to listen to the room a little bit. And this process is really unique in that Travis has like a folder of cool beats that he works on, and Sam Hollander, and who's in that picture, we got together with them, and it was pretty casual. We were hanging out in the studio, and they were playing us a folder of some stuff that they were working on, and that one kind of raised its hand. And at Travis's studio, his drum kit's set up at all times, and we just kind of dove in and started working on a song, and it came together in a day.
And are decisions on sounds like the acoustic guitar and the song, is that just made on the spot? You hear something and you make a decision?
Yeah, to a certain degree, sure. And again, sometimes these, like the studio now, or in my experience, you're kind of writing and recording at the same time.
Yep.
You know, there's never the there's not always the scenario where you're always working on guitar tone or bass tone, and you're kind of like plugging in DI and working at the speed of creativity, which I think is awesome, because I think then you're able to really focus on some of the, you know, these big picture parts, how the parts work, how the arrangement's working within the song. Then so we had a day to get together, then took the session back to my studio, worked on it back at my place, and sent it over to the guys, and then found out, it was just like, you know, one piece of cool news after another. Like, found out that they really liked the song, and then later found out, oh my gosh, it's gonna be the first single off their record, you know. It's pretty cool.
That's really cool.
Pretty cool experience.
Do you use the same mixer for your stuff, or is it different people are different?
Manny mixed that song.
Oh, cool.
I work with Neil Avron a lot. There's a lot of great guys out there.
Sure.
And sometimes I mix my own stuff with my engineer, Brian. You know, because I feel like that's sometimes with mixing, it's getting you're trying to nail the vibe, you know,
Absolutely,
and sometimes that, oftentimes for me, you know, precedes the minutia of the sonics.
It's why so many people send death metal to Dave.
Yeah.
So if you ever do
for
a
sure.
death metal records,
You're the guy.
Well, I mean, you can tell by the look.
That's what you do.
So I think,
Or was that a medical incident?
No.
I'm not sure.
I think that's the Texas football team.
So I think, you know, nailing that, and when you find something you love in the production, making sure that you're printing it. So whether it's something that that we're going to mix back at my place or we're going to send it out, you know, those are production, you know, decisions that, you know, probably, you know, you would have been printing to tape, you know, at a differerent time.
You're a console dude?
Am I?
Yeah.
No, that's my setup right there. So
Gotcha. Cool.
you know, I just have a set of mic pre's. I don't have a console.
Nice.
But and I do everything in the box
I
and
was
Pro
going to
Tools.
ask that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let me ask you a question, which is why we're here, I guess.
Yeah.
I love your guitar sounds, particularly on like some of the Neon Trees stuff, 1983, and everybody's talking. But all your guitar sounds aren't quite distorted, and they're not quite clean. They have like a. Are you miking like the strings acoustically?
Yeah,
Oh,
I do
you
a lot.
are.
I do that a lot.
That's,
Yeah, I didn't.
That's
I
how
didn't
you're
on
doing
that.
it.
I didn't not on that, but I do that a lot. Yeah, I got into that.
Because your
Just
low
speaking of
string,
definition.
your low guitar tones have definition. That's how you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I have a.
I love your sound.
Oh, thank you. I have a Gretsch that I do that a lot with, something that can project a little bit of sound, or any kind of like a casino, typically middle pickup, and and I we record a lot of times in headphones in the control room, and have a moment where it's like quiet on the set, shut down the door, and I would say, like, when I am tracking, I make sure I try to cover my bases. If we're not using an amp, I'm definitely, when we are using an amp, I'm making sure that I'm recording like a clean signal to reamp. And I go through phases where, there's certain pieces of gear I use all the time. Like there was a time where I was using a Silvertone Twin 12 on like almost every guitar, but I also try to make sure that I'm not tracking too many guitars. Where I can take one guitar, and a lot of times I'll, and I'm sure, by the way, this is not, technically right, but you take a guitar, you pan it to one side, then you maybe create a small room and put distortion after the small room and crank it on the other side, so it just feels a little bit blown out. And that way, when you get it tight, it just can
and the mix is
totally
amazing.
then just leap out of the speakers and feel like it's filling up a space.
Yeah.
It's doing what it needs to do.
Well, you do have a signature guitar sound. I really like it. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's really good.
Awesome, thank you.
And that cleaner sound, do you treat it in any way, or you just you just put it in the process? By the way, back in the day, we had these things called Tom Schultz Walkman. Yeah. And I used to mult into that and use the clean on that. And but you're doing it with the mic. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, on a lot of the early Neon Tree stuff, I had a Daking mic pre where you could really drive the input too, and would get some of the distortion or just a little bit of a little bit of grit, going into like a DI box and just driving the preamp.
So, Talking Is Hard from Walk the Moon. The drum process. Explain how you approach that.
Drummer's great.
That's
very
important.
A start.
Yeah.
I have I use a lot of the same mics on records. So my room, and the room, helps out quite a bit. The mics. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it.
What mics do you use usually?
Well, for rooms, I love 414s and a pair of Coles. Some of the usual suspects. I think on that record it was an SM57 on top and bottom. I love ATM 25s on toms. Overheads, For overheads, I have SM81s, and then I think on a hi-hat, SM7, I think something like that. And then the tuning of the snare on that record, kind of thumps you in the chest. That's, where you use those BFSD heads on top of it, or where you take a snare drum and you cut out the head and you put it on top. Sean, the drummer, had a bunch of those too. Those help you get that fat sound. Well, the BFSD is the best way to do it because you really get that fat sound. You can have you can tune up a snare drum pretty tight to the point where it's not going to lose pitch in between every take, which is really, that's important because before, those techniques came out, you would just be dropping the tuning on your snare and you'd only get like 1 or 2 takes out of it. But now, you kind of tune it up tight and put those on top and it
go for it.
Thumps you in the stomach.
All right, time for Batter's Box. You get to knock him out of the park. Dave will tee up the questions. DP, hit it.
Here we go.
Okay.
Piano.
Yamaha.
Nice.
Strings.
I need to change them.
Nice. Great answer.
Reverbs.
Valhalla.
Yeah, for sure. Limiter.
I got to figure out how to use one.
You know why I snuck that in.
Yeah.
Okay, stereo bass.
API 2500.
Room mics.
Trying to get them still bigger sounding.
Yeah, stop using the coal.
Yeah.
Guitar pedals.
Easy. Chorus, of course.
Synthesizers.
Juno.
106. Bass.
P.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What's the cheapest piece of gear you've used on a song that we probably know?
Ambox, for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's good, Herb.
Yeah.
He's really good.
Yeah, it's a San Diego bass thing. Good bass running, good bat speed.
Everything.
Yeah, it's very cool. What's the future hold, man?
Staying busy.
Yeah.
Staying busy. Trying to get some sleep.
Yeah, I got you.
Working on some cool records that we'll be hearing about.
Cool.
But yeah, just keep on keeping on.
It's a gift, right? I mean, it's absolutely a gift that we get to do.
I know it's a pretty incredible job.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're fans, and hopefully now we're friends. Thank you for gracing the desk. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please keep doing what you're doing. Keep pushing the envelope. It's great to hear people who just have no creative boundaries and just.
Thank you for having me.
Just push it, man. It was our pleasure.
This is so cool.
Very cool.
Thank you so much.
Dave, take us home.
It sure seems like the longer I do this and the more people like Tim that I'm in front of, it makes sense to me. Our industry and all we're selling is songs. A good song owns the industry, and without good songs, there is no music industry. And a good song can be broken down into 2 components, grooves and hooks. So a hip hop song can be grooves and hooks, or what Tim does can be grooves and hooks. And listen to his records because his lyrics, his melodies, his grooves, his hooks are as good as it gets. Learn something. I certainly did studying for this show. We'll see you next week.